and drug running going on in the Republican Party in the United States. And here he is talking to me about the end, what he says, in the 1990s, of television investigative journalism. What's happened to investigative television documentaries in Britain?
They don't exist, is the simple answer. It was starting around the time we made the Conspiracy of Silence film. The reason Yorkshire Television was contracted to make films for Discovery was that First Tuesday, the documentary series which it had been making for ITV, was cancelled. ITV decided to reorganise itself. It cancelled First Tuesday, which was, in my view, the best documentary series there has ever been on television, bar none. Both investigative and non-investigative. It wasn't purely investigative. Because it was cancelled, the brand First Tuesday was sold to Discovery. The series was to be called First Tuesday on Discovery. And that's what we made Conspiracy of Silence as. When Discovery behaved as it did, the rest of the series carried on. Yorkshire Television got their money, and in fact I made another film for Discovery under that brand. But there was no attempt at doing anything investigative. One of the most memorable First Tuesdays was made by a colleague of mine, and it was called 4 Hours in My Lai. It won a raft of awards, and it did what no one else had done, which was to track down the US soldiers who had massacred an entire village, the My Lai village, during the Vietnam War. It was, until the story of what happened, there had been a commission of inquiry which had been largely, inevitably, a whitewash. Kevin's films, Kevin Sim was the director, and who's, to my mind, a genius. It is the most powerful, the most affecting film, and if you get the chance to see it, you should. 4 Hours in My Lai. That was just one of many. When I arrived, I made a film. And again, it's an indication of how seriously First Tuesday and Yorkshire Television then took filmmaking. I made a film with a Chinese dissident, probably China's most effective and most loathed from the Chinese government point of view dissident in exile, a man called Harry Wu, who had been in its brutal penal labour camp system for 19 years, had escaped, had been stateless and living essentially on the streets, initially in the States, and had, without a passport and without any documents, decided to go back and take the first hidden camera inside this penal system. And I got in. Harry had shot all that footage. There were hours and hours of this. And Harry and I made a film about the penal camp system. Not just about his experiences and not just using his undercover footage, but the Chinese penal system is they're a series of factories. It is the world's biggest producer of prison slave labour goods. And if you go into shops in the UK and you find Chinese-made products, you're probably going to find that some part of them has been made by slave labour in Chinese prisons. And we conducted a number of undercover stings of Chinese government companies doing exactly this. It took a year to make that film. It cost £250,000 in 1992 and 1993. And Yorkshire Television and First Tuesday just said, it takes how long it takes. You spend what you need to spend. This film needs to be made. And that's what the attitude was. That, frankly, if you want to take an overview, is bloody inconvenient for governments. No government likes investigative journalists poking their nose into scandals, into asking questions. And much less do they like them spending years digging away and finding the truth. And I think whether or not that is the reason why the requirements for serious investigative filmmaking have been withdrawn, it is certainly convenient for government that they have been withdrawn.
So what's the consequences of not making these films that need to be made?
I draw an analogy. Again, this was a First Tuesday, a Yorkshire Television film. The Guildford four Irish men who were wrongly convicted of a bombing and who spent years and years and years in prison until a Yorkshire Television documentary, I think it was a First Tuesday, proved that they were innocent, and they were finally released. Similarly, Granada's World in Action did the same for the Birmingham Six. Had it not been for Granada and for Yorkshire, the Birmingham Six and the Guildford Four would never have seen the light of day again. Those gross miscarriages of justice, the ruin of those men's lives, would never have been exposed. Who's doing that today? Who would fund that today? It took the teams that did that, for whom I have the utmost respect. It took years of patient, forensic investigation that was paid for. What television company, what television network would do that today? I don't think there is one. Have those injustices gone away? Is there not ever going to be a Guildford 4 or a Birmingham 6 again? Of course there is. It's just that people like us, the old dinosaurs, aren't funded to do that work anymore. In British television, what's happened to The Cook Report, to World in Action, to This Week, to John Pilger's series, groundbreaking series, Viewpoint, all of those challenging, difficult, important series, they existed, apart from the fact that there were people who believed in making them, they existed by law, they existed by regulation. If you wanted, as an ITV company, to have a licence to broadcast, be it Yorkshire Television, Central Television, Thames, you had to pass a quality threshold, and it was built into your licence that you would broadcast and make a certain number of current affairs programmes, of investigations, of documentaries, of arts programming, of religious programming. It was there in stone, and you had to meet it. Those requirements have been successively removed. Every government since the late 80s has whittled away at them. There is now no requirement. ITV, as a commercial broadcaster, has no requirements under its licence to broadcast any number of hours of anything. It can do exactly what it wants. That has a knock-on effect. Broadcasting is an incredibly delicate ecosystem. If ITV doesn't do it, because it's expensive and doesn't necessarily yield the huge audiences, Channel 4 doesn't feel that it has to do it. If Channel 4 doesn't feel that it has to do it, the BBC doesn't feel that it has to do it. It's easier and cheaper not to do it. And when the pressure of your peers, your rivals, isn't there, there's no one keeping broadcasters honest.
If you were still sitting in your seat at First Tuesday, what sort of documentaries would you be pitching now? Would you be like to be making? Because, I wonder what it is we're not seeing, and I often think about television. It's what they're not showing us, which is really the most important thing we need to know. I
went to work for Al Jazeera, which in 2008. And I went to work for Al Jazeera because they were then the only broadcaster, and it is a British as well as an international broadcaster, willing to do serious programmes. And I made a number of films for them. As a freelance, I was always a freelance. At one point, I came across a story that I thought needed to be told. There were 3 whistleblowers from within Boeing who made allegations in court and in court documents, that Boeing had knowingly put up into the skies 1,600 planes, the most commonly used passenger planes, with bogus, ill-fitting and unlawful parts. I had their documents. I had Boeing's internal documents. They are absolutely correct. I took that, first of all, to Channel 4 as a story. I got an email back eventually from the commissioning editor at Channel 4 saying, and I quote again, "You cannot go round making allegations about well-respected international companies." End quotes. Now, actually, that's our job, provided those allegations are provable. I took it to ITV. ITV said, yeah, it's a good story, but it'll cost us a lot to have lawyers look at this, so I don't think we'll bother. And the BBC never bothered to answer. Al Jazeera, to their credit, funded it, and we made the film, and if anyone wants to view it, it's online, because all Al Jazeera's films are online. It's called On a Wing and a Prayer, and it should make everyone very nervous. It's an hour-long film. It's an hour-long investigation. That's what you're not seeing on British television now.
One would like to think that there still is a little investigative journalism going on, and if somebody is aware, a whistleblower, of some sort of injustice, that there's somewhere they can go.
Yes and no. I do think there are places where you can get investigative journalism on the airwaves. I think Jazeera is a fine example. I mean, I made a succession of those films, and they continue to make films which cause trouble, and I think that is terrific. It's equally true that Conspiracy of Silence, someone leaked the tape or a cut of the film to somebody else, and it's up on YouTube, and that's great. So that, you could look at that as a twinkle of hope. But otherwise, no. If you're a whistleblower, you have to have confidence that the people you talk to, A, can do something with the information and will do something with the information, and B, will protect you. And I go back to World in Action in the 80s. It made a very brave film about, I think, British Steel, and it did so on the basis of documents provided by whistleblowers, and 2 of its journalists went to prison rather than revealing their source. That wouldn't happen these days. There is no one, and I mean no one, prepared to fund proper investigative journalism. The Guardian will tell you that it does, but The Guardian is talking nonsense. If you look at what The Guardian publishes, its scoops that it trumpets, Snowden primarily, they came in from freelancers. They were not generated from within. It's only lone, awkward squad members who carry on digging that ever provide this stuff. It never happens within major media organisations.